Welcome to my reading of my book, Fragments of Light. This is an epic cyberpunk fantasy. It's been about, I think, a week and a half since I posted the last chapter, so hopefully you got caught up with all the other videos, and we are going to start with chapter 5. Now this chapter is a little bit different. Some of my chapters are broken up into different scenes. This particular chapter is likewise. There's a scene of events that are within one chapter with different characters. So I will pause the video and then read the next scene, but I will, you'll just see what happens. So anyways, we'll get started. So chapter 5, Green. When Emerald arrived at the main hall with her entourage, the feast was in full swing. The electronic orchestra filled the hall with its upbeat music, while many of Arcadia's lords, ladies, and business people were dancing, socializing, and starting on the first course. For the event, the black marbled hall was decorated with banners of green and silver, the king's colors. The twisted pillars that lined all the sides of the room were streamed with forest green banners that featured Damaris's house insignia, a sword and a staff crossing an emerald in the center. Behind the giant columns were candlelit dinner tables and chairs for the guests to sup. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling in increments throughout the room, with richly embroidered jade fabrics streaming from one to another. White light shone through the crystals of the chandeliers, creating soft prisms throughout the room. The herald noticed Emerald immediately, bowing to her. He was about to announce her to the guest, but the princess held up her hand, shaking her head. "Please, there is no need," Emerald said quickly, smiling at him. "I don't want the photographers to come running." The herald smiled, bowing. "Yes, princess." Emerald took a deep breath. "Here goes nothing," she muttered, then submersed herself among the crowd on the main floor, her handmaidens following closely behind. Emerald skimmed the crowds, hoping to spot Derek amongst them, but the floor was incredibly packed. She saw Prince Xerxes of the Twin Kingdoms, who was engaged in a heated conversation with Lord Ryland of Arcadia's eastern sector. Prince Xerxes had been one of the many suitors that had asked for Emerald's hand in marriage, only to be rejected by her father. She had no personal feelings for the prince, but he always seemed like he would make a fine companion in life. Galatia calmly leaned into Emerald. "I don't see him, princess," she whispered. "Who?" "Prince Derek, of course." "Why are you so obsessed with finding him?" Emerald asked sharply, still holding a smile for the guest as they walked by. "Because I know you are looking for him. I was just trying to help," Galatia said nonchalantly, sounding slightly defensive. She bowed as an important figure strode by. Under her breath, Emerald laughed. "Sometimes I hate you because you know exactly what I'm thinking." "How many years have I served you, princess?" "Too many," Emerald answered, lowering her voice as she stated. "Perhaps the prince is toward the back of the hall or still upstairs in his quarters." "I'll keep my eyes open for him," Galatia whispered, her gaze wandering throughout the crowd. A server walked by, offering a goblet of wine. She gracefully accepted the glass, drinking the bitter liquid carefully, not wanting to spill it on her dress. She turned to Galatia and her other handmaidens. "Go and enjoy the party. I need to make my rounds." They smiled happily. "Yes, princess." The handmaidens bowed, then wandered off to a group of male servants from the palace, all except Galatia, who paused for a second. "Good luck, princess," Galatia said, giving Emerald a small wink before joining the others. Emerald smiled to herself as she saw Celeste flirting with one of the servants. The servant was seemingly enraptured by her presence. Good for her, Emerald thought. At least someone will have a pleasant evening. Without warning, Emerald heard the snapping sounds of the photographer's cameras. She let out a small groan, then flashed her best smile, pausing for the cameras. The partygoers, realizing that their princess had arrived, stopped their conversation and bowed, talking amongst themselves. No doubt it was about her ensemble for the evening. They all then resumed their activities as she walked by. After finishing up a few photos, Emerald observed several of her father's inner council talking amongst themselves. Emrys, who was among them, saw her glancing in his direction. He gave a slight nod of his head, then a quick half smile, continuing his conversation with Counselor Lysander. Emerald hinted a smile back, turning away. "Princess Emerald," an even voice called out from behind. Startled, Emerald glanced behind her. There he stood, more gorgeous than she remembered. Towering over her, Derek's muscular build was well suited in a blue regalia, while his ice blue eyes shimmered in the light, framed by dark lashes. Within his black curls rested a silver and sapphire circlet. He revealed a solid, handsome grin, accentuating his angular features. Emerald's heart stopped. "Derek?" Emerald exclaimed, more breathlessly than she would have liked to let on. It couldn't be helped. He had caught her completely off guard. He took her hand and kissed it gently. Emerald's body jittered with nerves, and it took everything not to show it. Derek gave a deep bow, his back spikes thrusting into the air behind him. As he rose upright, his grand black ruff fanned out from behind his head. His deep blue satin cape swept to the floor. Everything about him was tidy and precise, even down to the curl on his head. He was the epitome of perfection itself. The thought made her melt. "I thought you were going to walk by and not even say hello to an old friend," he said, smiling and leaning into her. Emerald couldn't help but notice how close Derek was, and it made her blush. "I just might have if you hadn't said something," she managed to say as her heart raced in her chest. "Well then, it's a good thing I spoke up," he chuckled. "I can't believe you are here. I knew you were planning on visiting later in the season, but then I got word that you arrived this evening." Derek gave her a bright smile. "I was to come later," he admitted, "but I was able to get out of this season's engagements a bit early. Besides, my father's court doesn't need me all the time." He offered his arm, which Emerald happily accepted. His doublet's fabric was soft to the touch, and as she drew closer, she became acutely aware of the prince's light scent of cedar. "What's your agenda while you are here? Will you be staying a while?" Derek led her to the royal table, then pulled out the chair reserved for her. Smiling, Emerald seated herself as he pushed it back in for her. "It all depends if business works out in my favor," he said. A server came by to fill his glass as he sat down next to Emerald. He took a drink of the wine, continuing, "Sometimes it takes longer than planned." His eyes reflected in the candlelight from the tables. "Oh, and what business is this you speak of?" Emerald laughed, biting her lip nervously. Derek looked at her, smiling. "That, princess, is a secret. But hopefully it won't stay a secret for too long." "Secret? You can tell me, Derek. I'll keep it safe." Emerald joked mildly, taking a drink of her wine. "I know you would," he replied in an amused tone, a small smile forming. Emerald could tell Derek was not going to say anything further on the matter, and decided not to press him. She instantly felt silly for her poor attempt at her bold statement. Derek raised his chalice to meet hers, then took a drink with his eyes locked onto hers. She felt her cheeks flush, unsure of what to say. She tried to act casual while drinking her wine, but she was doing a poor job of it. "Well, I hope your visit isn't short. It's been too long since we've seen each other," Emerald said. "It really has," he agreed. He even gave her another smile, and then his gaze turned to his glass. 7 years is far too long, don't you agree? Her heart pounded through her chest, and a gush of nerves mixed with excitement hit her all at once. Is he visiting because of me? She thought. The happy thought caused her to beam brightly at him. A server came by, providing them with the evening's main course. Derek didn't start on his dinner, but continued to drink his wine. So tell me, Princess, what have you been up to all these years since we last saw each other? He inquired. I have seen you in some fashion ads in magazines and online with Arcadia's businesses, but you do your best to stay out of the media's eye for the most part. He leaned into her, lowering his voice slightly. Or dare I say that has something to do with your father? He gave her a knowing look. Emerald sighed. Derek had always been aware of how irrational her father acted, and it had been an old habit of his. Of it had been an old habit of his years ago to inform her of this awareness during every visit. Unfortunately, that has not changed since you last saw me, Derek, she explained. And as far as the fashion shoots, I am not sure that I'm good at them. The photographers need to give me a lot of direction, and I just feel, well, uncomfortable being the center of attention. From what I've seen, you seem to do a fine job at it. Emerald laughed, swirling her goblet, then taking a drink. You're much too kind. If you ever saw me in action, you would understand. Emerald thought for a moment about her last shoot. It had taken twice as long as usual for Hayes to get the poses he wanted from her. Are you still painting? You were always so good at it. Yes, I am. Every day. It is the only true activity that lets my mind escape these walls, Emerald said quietly. And you? What is the Prince of York up to these days? I have seen online that you have been the subject of all the presses. With much work in your court, I see. Also, you attend almost every gala and party within York's nearby kingdoms. Derek looked amused. Princess, the press has embellished my life to the point that nothing they say is true, he said dismissively. As far as the work within York's court, that is true. But I rarely attend the galas unless my father demands it of me. The press does have a way of redecorating the truth, Emerald said. More like bending reality. His eyes lit up, and they both laughed. A server came by and filled their goblets with more wine. He glanced at her in the candlelight intently, drinking her in with his eyes. Embarrassed, Emerald felt her cheeks burn once more, but otherwise she remained calm. He lifted his glass to her. Let's toast. Okay. What shall we toast to? How about rekindling our friendship? He held up his glass, waiting for hers to meet his. Emerald returned the favor, clinking her goblet to his. To rekindling our friendship. They both took a drink and smiled at each other. Right then, Emerald felt an annoying tap on her shoulder. Turning her head, Emerald found Hayes, the palace photographer, standing over her with his tan skin glowing and his mouth curved into a smile. He looked tamer than usual, but that wasn't saying much. His short silver hair was slicked back, with dark eye makeup and silver lips accentuating his face. His silver jacket had large puff sleeves embellished with black and white striped patterns. Yes, this was one of his dress-down days. He held out his hand. Princess, princess. He shook his head. How dare you not dance with me yet this late into the evening? His dark eyes told her, shame on you. She laughed back at him. I didn't realize I had to make my evening all about you, Emerald said playfully, rolling her eyes. Not feeling so well this evening, Hayes? Emerald eyed his flashy outfit, then gave him a joking smile. Derek raised an eyebrow. Believe me, Princess, you don't want to hear about it, Hayes commented. I believe you owe me a dance this evening. Derek eyed Hayes with a hard stare. Emerald wasn't sure if what the prince was thinking was good or bad, but it was definitely about Hayes. Emerald turned to Derek. Will you excuse me for a moment? Derek's face held firm, but he nodded, taking a drink of his wine. Sure. Don't keep me waiting too long. Believe me, Derek, that's not the plan, Emerald thought. Emerald and Hayes walked to where the others were dancing. They bowed to each other, then started dancing with everyone else. Emerald spotted Hayes's date off to the side of the onlookers. He gave Emerald a slight nod in approval, then wandered off into the crowd. How's Troy? Emerald asked, referring to Hayes's partner. He's fine. A bit over the top lately, if you ask me. Oh, how so? You know how I am. I like to go out with friends. He doesn't. The usual. I see. Don't you worry your pretty little head about me, he said, swiftly turning her as they danced. Hayes leaned in. So, tell me how this evening is going. Are you having a smashing time with Prince Derek? Emerald followed Hayes's lead. Yes, I am actually. I haven't seen him in years, and I'm very happy to see him. Fabulous. I didn't think you needed to be rescued from his conversation, but I had to find out what is happening between you two. You know, the whole room is talking about it. He laughed as he swayed her. Emerald joined in with his laughter, giggling at the news. Oh, they are? Well, why wouldn't they? You both are not betrothed and are spending almost the whole entire evening together. It makes for great gossip. I suppose it does. Emerald smiled at the thought of everyone talking about them. The image of her and Derek together made her beam stupidly. He is watching us, Hayes whispered in her ear. Emerald's cheeks began to burn as she was about to turn in Derek's direction. Hayes warned, Don't look at him. He pulled her body back in his direction, laughing. Then he will know we are talking about him. Besides, it's good to let him stew over there. Hayes, that's not very nice, Emerald said playfully. Besides, what if I want to make all the rumors become true? I can't keep him waiting too long. Oh, don't worry. He'll wait for you, Hayes said. How can you tell? Emerald's heart began to pound in her body. Hayes held her close, finishing the dance between them. I just can, he said with a wink.